Welcome to the training session on online marketing for conferences and events. This is session 1 on online marketing within the conference lifecycle. And through this session, we want to take you through understanding the impact of online marketing for a conference business. Now that online is playing an increasing part in the conference model, and evaluating the risks and opportunities that you have to deal with when you're looking at online marketing. Also, we want to talk to you a little bit about understanding the online delegate and how they search and look online on websites for the information that they require. And we're going to finish the session with some areas of legal consideration that you need to take into account when you're developing your online marketing campaigns. So let's start with the impact of online marketing for the conference business. Obviously, now that online has come into play with conference businesses, we've got to look more at how your online site is part of your 24/7 shop window, and customers expect that your shop is open all the time for business. So the days of running a one-hit event and moving on have changed significantly. And the life cycle for planning has also changed as customers expect your shop to always be open for business. It means that there's also a shift in what would have been the 12-week marketing model for conferences, or if you had a larger event, sometimes it was 16 to 24 weeks, has also changed as online activity can sometimes take longer to get up and running. It means also that you need different tactics for online, and that you might consider having different tactics for annual events and for your one-off hit events. So for example, for an annual event, you wouldn't have the date of the website in your website URL because you would want to keep using the SEO that you build up year on year. And so you would make a conscious decision that your web URL would be something that you could use for years to come. Online marketing requires different skills from the traditional direct marketer. You need different copywriting skills. You also need to have some technical knowledge if you're looking at the back end of your websites. And talking about your SEO and pay-per-click advertising, it requires some different technical expertise that you didn't used to use when you were looking at primarily print and email marketing. It also means that you have different tracking criteria, and that the ROI is not always the main metric that you would use to evaluate the success of your campaign. I think most event companies use the 400% return on investment model, or have done, but with online this is not always the case, as quite frequently if you were to evaluate spend based on 400%, your success would look outstanding, but you might have only had one booking. For example, email is a great example of that. So you can see there's quite a few different things to think about. The opportunities, though, are extremely large when it comes to online marketing. Online marketing costs are less compared to any other kind of advertising or marketing. It's a lot more cost efficient, for example, than doing direct marketing, especially if you're doing a global campaign. The reach is also far larger, so the number of potential customers can be hundreds of thousands because there's millions of internet users all over the world, compared to maybe 3,000 or 4,000 if you're doing a DM campaign. Customers can also find it easier to search products that they intend to buy over the internet, because all they require is the right keyword and a good search function, so it can be easier for customers to reach you also. It's also worth thinking about the advertising appeal that this has for sponsors, as obviously the internet's a far more attractive way because you're going out to more people. But not only that, you can also update the products more frequently. You can include product reviews. You can have some data capture things there for sponsors, and you can also make sure that they're using it to update their campaigns as much as possible, and if they wanted to, they could update it almost daily. The results are pretty much instantaneous, so if you were to put up some advertising on Google, you probably would start to see results from the moment that you put up your adverts online, whereas other traditional methods sometimes can take a couple of days, even up to 3 or 4 weeks with DM if you're doing global campaigns. It's also far more diverse in terms of multimedia. There's a lot more effective uses of the web for video. You can use different white papers and things online, which you wouldn't be able to include if you were doing newsletters sometimes because of bandwidth, or even advertising. So it's worth thinking of how you can use the web for different terms of multimedia and not just plain copy. And also you get a lot better geographic penetration, so you can now almost go into every different territory with your event. And it's really good if you're looking at geographically cloning events to think about how you can start with that online. Obviously, there are also risks that come with marketing online, and it's worth just considering these before you begin your online campaigns. We've mentioned already about challenging the ROI statistics, and this can also be a risk, because if you're not measuring your activity effectively, or you're not sure what the right measurements are, for example for social media like Facebook and Twitter, then you can often be ploughing your time into something that's not being as fruitful as if you put your time and effort into something else. There's also an extreme reliance on technology. And if you've got problems, say for example your website goes down on the day of your early bird booking discount, then obviously that spells huge problems for you. So you've got to make sure that your technical infrastructure is safe and sound, and there are backup plans there as well. One of the biggest problems with online is the perceived lack of customer experience. It's very difficult if you're having no visual stimulation with customers, or even a telephone conversation, that it can be perceived that it's very one-dimensional, and it's how you can have a conversation with customers and build loyalty with them that will help you eventually build up this customer experience. And a lot of that we will cover in the 10 sessions, but it includes making sure that they are receiving the relevant information that suits their needs. Otherwise, if you don't deal with that lack of customer experience, you'll end up losing people from your site. Oversaturation is another big problem, and can also be very difficult in the events industry. There's a lot, especially in specific sectors like IT and pharmaceutical, and there's a lot of events and conferences, lots of competition, and it can be very difficult to get your event seen in a crowded place, especially if you're looking at Google and search as one of your main ways of people finding you. If you're not in the top page of the rankings, obviously it's very difficult for you to get seen. The other thing about online, and this is where quite a lot of managers have concerns, is that it can be very time consuming, and it's very difficult to measure effectively the amount of time that you spend online, because you can be dipping in and out of different pieces of activity, and especially with a lot more time being spent on social media. The online part of the campaign has integrated more and more into the traditional marketing campaign, and now effectively most people are spending probably 60% online and 40% on more traditional methods like advertising and direct mail. There's also some concerns from customers around privacy and fears of fraud, so you have to make sure that you've got everything in place for your payment for security, but also that your privacy policy is really sound and not too complicated, so that you're making it as easy as possible for people to buy into your service, and that you're not giving them any reasons to kind of back away. Understanding the online delegate is a fundamental part of online marketing success. Visitors that come to your site are not automatically customers. So just because they're on your website doesn't mean that they are going to buy something from you, product or service otherwise. They're basically window shopping. And it's the usability and the utility of the site, not the visual design, that determine the success or failure of your site. As the visitor to your conference site is the only person who clicks the mouse and decides everything, user-centric design has to be the first thing that you think of when you're designing your site. But it also means that if they can't use a feature or it's not got a purpose for them, it may as well not be on the website. So basically, if you're thinking of your online delegate, they're not that different from somebody who's shopping in a store. They glance at each new page, scan some of the text, and click on the first link that catches their interest or vaguely resembles the thing that they're looking for. So in fact, there's large pages of the site that they don't look at all, and most of them are searching for something interesting and clickable. And as soon as they find that, they click. And if it doesn't meet their expectations, then the back button is clicked and the search process is continued. So users appreciate quality, but they're actually looking more for the content rather than the design. They also follow their intuition. In most cases, users muddle through instead of reading the information that the designer has provided. And according to Steve Krug, who's one of the marketing gurus for online, the basic reason for that is that they don't really care. He believes that if they find something that works, we tend to stick to it, and it doesn't matter if we understand how it works, as long as we can use it. So the audience doesn't really mind that you're designing them a great billboard, just as long as they can read it and use it and move on. They also want to have control, so they always want to be able to control their browser and rely on constant data presentation throughout the site. So they don't want new windows popping up unexpectedly, and they want to be able to get back to where they began with a back button. The back button is the #1 used area on any website. So it's good practice never to open links in new browser windows. They also, as I've previously mentioned, don't read, they scan. And analysing a web page, which we're going to do within this session, it shows you some fixed points and anchors which can help you write some content when we go on to session 4 around how you can design your web copy to be the most successful for this scan and click principle. So we know a little bit now about how they behave, but let's have a look at what they expect. Users for websites basically expect that the home page offers the greatest degree of flexibility. So this is where they would primarily expect to see the most amount of difference within a site. They're generally looking for a top navigation or a navigation on the left of the page, and this is because this is standard principle on most websites, so they're trained to look for this type of navigation. They also have certain expectations and tolerance for how the information is organised. So they would expect that when they're on the page, the registration information is in a certain location, that they have venue information, they have a program page, and that it's laid out normally within 2 columns. As long as you stick to these principles, generally this is what people expect. The lower level pages then are typically to employ further subcategory information. But if we take a look at this community care conferences example, which I have put here, you'll see that the navigation and the lower level pages are all on the left-hand side. Web pages should be designed to represent information. However, normally they're laid out in this way so that a large percentage employs a 2 or 3 column layout, which is the example we have got here. Normally the primary navigation is on the left. It can also be on the top if you have secondary navigation, and the content's in the center. Majority of secondary or relevant links and content are on the far right, and we'll come to the reasons for this shortly. So where do they look when they're on these pages? Well, good information architecture and strong visual design are the key to leading the user's eye around the page. They tend to look at the top navigation, and they look at content positioning and relationships. So for example, I've given you an example here of the ATC Global Conference website, which I believe is very good at pointing out positioning and relationships. If you look at the top middle navigation where they've got large black menu tabs, this is a really great example of content positioning and relationships, as they're trying to drive the eye directly to where they want the visitors to go. So it's making really easy points of focus for them to establish the information they want very quickly. They also use relative weight, volume and size to distinguish between the different types of content. A further use of colour, typography and iconography is a great way of drawing people to look at something that you want them to focus in on. So for example, in the body of the copy on this site, they've put some blue copy in to draw them through to the conference page rather than the exhibition. It's also very important to make sure you have sparing use of animation and not too much flash, especially when it comes to advertising, as this will take them away and draw the eye away from the content that you're looking to get them to read. So how do people read when they're on the site? Well, website usage is typically motivated by the desire to save time. So really, they're not going to be on your site for 10-15 minutes. So there's no point writing an essay. They're going to be on there for a fraction of that time. They're only interested in probably about 25% of what is on the page. And they know that they don't need to read everything. They know that you've added in extra information. So scanning is a behaviour that's extremely common in every day, and we don't just do it online, we also do it in newspapers, magazines and books. But because of the level of information that is available on websites, the use of scanning is much more prolific. This is a heat map of how people read web pages, and it's called the S pattern. Users look at hot areas and basically scan across the page in what has been established as the F shape. So they read in a horizontal movement, usually across the upper part of the content area, and this initial element forms the F's top bar. Next, they move down the page a bit and read across in a second horizontal movement that typically covers a shorter area than the previous movement. This additional element forms the F's lower bar. And finally, users scan the content's left side in a vertical movement. Sometimes this is fairly slow and systematic scan that appears as a solid stripe on this heat map where they're tracking the user's eye. At other times, users move faster, creating a spottier heat map, which forms the F stem. So basically what this shows us is the ideal content positioning for you to use on your site. Now, normally when you look at a conference webpage, you do see an awful lot of bullet point summations on the home pages, trying to summarize the key USPs and benefits. And this is particularly good if it's located in the lower part of the F shape. What does the F-shape implications have for you as part of your marketing campaign? Well, I think that actually the implications are quite clear, and they show the importance of following the guidelines for writing for the web, repurposing print content. Users won't read your text thoroughly in a word-by-word manner, so exhaustive reading is rare, and actually when they're conducting their initial research to compile a short list of vendors, they'll only read roughly 25% of your copy. Some people, of course, will read more, but most won't. So the first two paragraphs must state the most important information. There's some hope that users will actually read this material, but they'll probably read more of the first paragraph than the second paragraph. So start subheaders and paragraphs and bullet points with information-carrying words that users will notice when they're scanning down the left side of your content. They'll read the third word of a line much less often than the first two.